What do people do when they see you? What do they say to you most?
What's up?
Just what's up?
They see me every day, so it's not a
I see, that's a nice thing.
In 2025, Spike Lee turns 64. At 64, his life should have been marked by glory, gratitude, and legacy. Yet in a cruel twist of fate, the man who once made Hollywood tremble with Do the Right Thing now lives within a tragedy beyond imagination. A lifetime spent fighting prejudice, injustice, and the very system that raised him. He won, then lost. He was celebrated, then forgotten. The Oscar came too late. Fame was traded for loneliness. One by one, the people he loved passed away, leaving behind an old filmmaker alone amid the ashes of a dream called justice. At 64, the lights of the theater have gone out, but the darkness in his soul still lingers. And the most haunting question remains: how could a man who once did the right thing end up in so much pain? A childhood of music smoke and the first lessons of pain. Before he became the black soul of Hollywood, Spike Lee was just a skinny boy sitting on the porch in Atlanta, watching his father quietly play the saxophone through the humid southern nights. He was born on March 20, 1957, at a time when America was still divided by color. His father, Bill Lee, was a gifted but struggling jazz musician. His mother, Jacqueline Shelton Lee, was an art and literature teacher, a woman who believed that art can save the black soul. They had 5 children, and in their cramped Brooklyn apartment where the family moved when Spike was just a few years old, music paintings and dinner table debates about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were as common as breathing. It was his mother who gave him the nickname Spike, meaning a sharp thorn, because as she said, "He's stubborn, no one can bend him." And indeed, that thorn would one day pierce Hollywood's heart, reminding the world that Spike Lee was not someone who would ever stay silent. But that childhood wasn't a gentle melody. Beneath the smooth sounds of bass and trumpet were days of struggle. Bill Lee's income was unstable, so most of the household relied on his wife's modest salary. They didn't have much, only books, records, and dreams. Spike once said, "My mother was the first person who taught me that if I didn't tell my own story, someone else would tell it for me." She often took her children to museums, cinemas, and concerts, planting in her 10-year-old black son the seed of pride in his heritage. The 1960s in Brooklyn were far from easy. When the family moved to Bedford-Stuyvesant, then a largely Italian neighborhood, the locals stared. "We were the first black family on the block," Spike recalled in an interview with People magazine. "The neighborhood kids called me names I'll never forget." That was the first time young Spike realized that skin color could make people hate you even when you'd done nothing wrong. But instead of fear, he began to observe how people looked at each other, how they spoke the details that would later become his cinematic language. Spike attended public school where overcrowded classrooms left teachers struggling to remember students' names. But he was curious. He liked watching street arguments, listening to radio news about the Vietnam War, and staying up late for old black and white films. His mother encouraged it all. She would tell him, "Don't just look, understand." And Spike understood that the world was unfair and that perhaps he would have to create his own justice. Tragedy struck when Spike was just 20. His mother, the light of his childhood, died of cancer in 1977 at the age of 44. It felt like losing an arm, Spike told the Los Angeles Times. At the time, he was in his junior year at Morehouse College in Atlanta, the same school that produced Martin Luther King Jr. The shock silenced him. Friends invited him to movies to ease the grief. In those dark theaters with the light of the projector flickering across his face, Spike discovered something unexpected: cinema could replace words, it could turn pain into beauty. He picked up a Super 8 camera and began filming everything around him: neighbors, street corners, kids playing basketball in the summer heat. From that moment, filmmaking became his way to survive. Losing his mother wasn't just a wound, it was a calling to tell the stories of black people like her, like his father, like himself. But the darkness didn't stop there. Bill Lee, his father, slowly sank into alcohol and drugs as his music career declined. Spike watched him struggle with addiction debt and a string of lost jobs. Yet he never hated his father. To Spike, Bill remained the man who taught him that rhythm is the soul of every story. In many of Spike's films, from Mo Better Blues to Crooklyn, we see traces of that lonely, proud, and broken musician painted with raw, heartbreaking honesty. In 1978, Spike Lee graduated from Morehouse College with a degree in mass communications. While his friends pursued jobs in advertising or television, Spike applied to the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. He had no money, just a short film reel and a dream. To pay tuition, he worked any job he could find: library assistant, cafe waiter, wedding videographer. At one point, he survived on instant noodles in a tiny Manhattan apartment where he poured himself into writing his first scripts. "I didn't know how to succeed," he recalled. "I just knew I couldn't go back." At NYU, Spike met the first mentors who saw his brilliance. They told him, "You don't just have vision, you have fire." In 1983, he made a short film titled Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop, We Cut Heads, with a budget of only $15,000. The film won the Student Academy Award, the first time the name Spike Lee echoed through the world of cinema. Looking back on his childhood, Spike once said, "A line that left many silent. Maybe I had to lose my mother. See my father fall and grow up in a neighborhood full of prejudice to understand that film isn't just entertainment. It's how I survive." Becoming the defiant voice of American cinema. Nothing foretold that the skinny kid from Brooklyn would one day change Hollywood forever. Spike Lee entered the world of cinema with no privilege, no backing, only ambition, and an old camera. After graduating from Morehouse College, the same school Martin Luther King Jr. attended, he pursued a master's degree at the prestigious Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. There, Spike began his uphill journey, studying, working odd jobs, and editing films in a room so small it could barely fit an editing table. In 1983, his graduation film Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop, We Cut Heads, was born, a story about a barbershop in a poor black neighborhood in Brooklyn, where Spike himself grew up. The film was screened at the New Directors New Films Festival at Lincoln Center, the first time ever for a student. That same year, he won the Academy Student Award, a small victory that paved the way for bigger dreams. 3 years later, in 1986, Spike Lee did something few dared to do. He raised $175,000, nearly $500,000 today, to shoot She's Gotta Have It. There were no stars, no studio, just friends, family, and a belief that audiences would understand his voice. Shot in black and white over 12 days on a shoestring budget, the crew sharing sandwiches to get by the film became a sensation, grossing $7 million, 40 times its cost. The movie told the story of a young black woman in Brooklyn, independent, confident, loving 3 men at once, and refusing to be defined by any of them. At the time, that image was shocking. But Spike wasn't trying to provoke scandal. He simply wanted to show that black people could be intellectual, urban, self-aware, and as complex as anyone else. The New York Times critic A.O. Scott later wrote that She's Gotta Have It ignited the American independent film movement of the 1980s. At 29, Spike Lee became the face of a new generation of filmmakers, bold, outspoken, and unbowed by white Hollywood. He didn't stop there. In 1988 came School Days, a musical satire on colorism and class conflict among black college students. White audiences found it difficult, but black viewers embraced it for daring to voice uncomfortable truths. A year later, he released Do the Right Thing, the film that would forever change how Hollywood viewed black cinema. Set over a single sweltering day in Brooklyn, the film simmers with racial tension that explodes into tragedy. Spike wrote, directed, produced, and even starred as Mookie, the pizza delivery man caught in the chaos. The film grossed $37.3 million worldwide, and critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both named it the best movie of 1989. But beyond the box office and accolades, Do the Right Thing became a mirror of America, a country boiling with racial unrest, where justice and injustice were separated by the throw of a single brick through a window. In the following years, Spike Lee continued to tackle uncomfortable subjects. Mo Better Blues, 1990, was both a tribute to jazz and to his father Bill Lee, who composed its score. Jungle Fever, 1991, delved into interracial relationships between a black architect and a white secretary, sparking national debate. Each film was another cut from the raw fabric of American life, painful, real, and unapologetic. Then, in 1992 came his life's mission, Malcolm X. The 3-hour, 22-minute epic with a $33 million budget told the life of the revolutionary civil rights leader from street hustler to the man who changed America's conscience. Denzel Washington's performance was transcendent, cementing him as a legend. But behind that success lay a battle. When Warner Brothers threatened to pull funding mid-production, Spike called on his celebrity friends, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Prince Janet Jackson to help finance the project. When it finally premiered, black audiences lined up around the block. Many wept. Roger Ebert called it a deeply moving masterpiece, and critics hailed it as one of the greatest films ever made. Yet Hollywood turned its back. The film earned only 2 Oscar nominations, Best Actor for Denzel Washington and Best Costume Design, and none for Spike Lee. They wanted to honor Malcolm X, Spike said bitterly, but ignored the man who told his story. Through the 1990s, Spike Lee became more than a director. He became a social voice. He appeared on major magazine covers, spoke publicly about racial justice, and called out Hollywood for favoring white stories in black worlds. He founded his own studio, 40 Acres, and a Mule Filmworks in Brooklyn, the place where it all began to produce independent projects. By 1995, the company had released over 15 films employing hundreds of black actors and technicians. But behind the lights of fame lay another truth: the road was lonely. Spike Lee once said, "Hollywood didn't invite me in. I had to knock the door down myself." For more than 3 decades, he remained an outsider, constantly fighting for his films to be seen, heard, and respected. And that is what made his career both radiant and suffocating, a life lived in resistance powered by the conviction that cinema could still do the right thing. When Hollywood turned its back on the truth. In 1989, Spike Lee brought all of Brooklyn to the screen in Do the Right Thing. One sweltering summer day, small tensions, and then a single death that ignited an entire neighborhood. No superheroes, no miracles, just people and generations of suppressed anger. The film ended with a brick crashing through a pizza shop window and silence in the theater. A punch straight to America's heart. Yet when Do the Right Thing premiered, Hollywood reacted as if Spike Lee had just lit a match over a barrel of gunpowder. White critics were bitterly divided. Some praised it, others condemned it. A few major newspapers even warned that the film could incite black riots. New York Magazine ran an editorial titled, "Hope to God it doesn't open in your neighborhood." They feared that if black audiences saw their own injustice on screen, they might rise up. Spike Lee would later recall with bitterness, "A bunch of white media fools thought my movie would start riots." What they didn't understand was that the real riot had been going on for hundreds of years. Only the black folks weren't the ones throwing the bricks. Ironically, when Do the Right Thing hit theaters, not a single riot occurred. Instead, it was hailed by audiences and scholars as a cinematic masterpiece. Roger Ebert, the most influential critic in America, wrote, "This is the first American film that forces us to face the truth. This country has never solved its race problem." Such success should have marked a triumphant new chapter in Spike Lee's career. But when Oscar season came, Hollywood proved it wasn't ready to confront a man like him. When the nominations were announced, Do the Right Thing received only 2 Best Original Screenplay for Spike Lee and Best Supporting Actor for Danny Aiello. No Best Picture, no Best Director. A cold, calculated slap. That year, the Best Picture Oscar went to Driving Miss Daisy, a sweet story about an elderly Jewish woman and her black chauffeur set in the same era, but offering a version of race relations that Hollywood preferred gentle, forgiving, and free of accountability. All of America saw the irony. The film that asked, "Where is justice?" was pushed aside, while the one that said, "Accept your fate," was celebrated. Actress Kim Basinger, standing on stage as a presenter that night, broke from the script and said bluntly, "There's one film missing from this list, and it's the most important film of the year, Do the Right Thing." The room froze, but the Academy stayed silent. Spike Lee sat in the audience, forcing a smile, his eyes heavy with disappointment. Years later, he admitted, "What hurt me most wasn't that my film wasn't nominated. It was that Driving Miss Daisy won. It felt like Hollywood saying, 'We're still not ready to hear you.'" The press called it a stain on Oscar history. Critic Mark Harris wrote, "In 1989, Hollywood chose the story that made white audiences comfortable and ignored the story America truly needed to hear." Do the Right Thing went on to gross $37 million on a $6 million budget, was named one of the 100 greatest American films of all time by the American Film Institute, and was preserved by the Library of Congress as a work of cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. But for Spike Lee, none of that erased the pain of being rejected at his moment of triumph. From that year on, Spike Lee knew he wasn't just a director, he was a witness. And in Hollywood, bearing witness to the truth often means isolating yourself from the system. The 1989 Oscar snub didn't kill Spike Lee, it defined him. From that day forward, he waged a lifelong war against an industry that polishes its gold statues while silencing black truth with polite smiles. The ceremony ended that night, but the wound stayed open for decades. And every time another film about Black lives was snubbed, people remembered the question Spike once threw at Hollywood. Why are you so afraid of us telling the truth? Malcolm X, a masterpiece completed in blood. After the pain of being overlooked for do the right thing, Spike Lee entered the 1990s with a bigger dream to tell the story of the greatest black hero of the 20th century, Malcolm X. He once said, "If I don't make this film, who will? If black people don't tell our own story, who's going to tell it, right?" But that dream was almost killed by Hollywood. The Malcolm X project began in 1990 under Warner Brothers, with an initial budget of around $28 million. Spike Lee wanted to make an epic, not just about one man's life, but about the spiritual transformation of an entire people. However, production ran longer than expected. The script expanded, and international shoots in Mecca, Egypt, and South Africa drove the cost up by another $5 million. Immediately, the insurance company overseeing expenses, Completion Bond Company, issued an ultimatum. Unless Spike personally covered the overages, they would shut down post-production and fire the crew. Spike Lee stood on the edge of collapse. I looked around the editing room. He recalled empty desks, reels of unfinished film, dozens of people out of work. I knew that if I didn't act, Malcolm X would die in the dark. So he did the unthinkable. He called his famous friends for help. Within days, he reached out to Bill Cosby, Oprah Winfrey, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Prince Janet Jackson, one by one. Bill Cosby was the first call I made, Spike remembered. He sent a check that same day, didn't ask a single question. Altogether, the contributions from these black icons kept the project alive. Without them, Spike said, I would have had to shut down post-production, and America would never have had Malcolm X. Behind this heroic story lay a bitter truth: Hollywood was never ready to fund black filmmakers equally. Spike Lee declared bluntly, they'll throw hundreds of millions at white directors to tell fairy tales, but hesitate to spend a few more million so a black man can tell the truth. And he was right. Malcolm X was one of the few epic biographical films about a black historical figure ever produced within the Hollywood system. And it survived only because of community solidarity, not studio faith. Spike fought daily to protect his vision, resisting demands to shorten the runtime enduring political pressure surrounding Malcolm X's legacy. He stood firm, insisting on his 3-hour 22-minute cut, saying Malcolm X cannot be reduced to 2 hours of entertainment. When the film premiered in November 1992, all doubts vanished. Malcolm X received a storm of praise from critics. Roger Ebert called it a masterpiece of cinema, both fierce and deeply moving. The Los Angeles Times wrote, Spike Lee has achieved the impossible. He's turned Malcolm X's life into a spiritual awakening. Black audiences wept in theaters, many wearing shirts emblazoned with the letter X, sparking a nationwide Malcolm mania. Denzel Washington delivered a performance so powerful it seemed possessed. He earned an Oscar nomination for Best Actor, but lost to Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, a result that outraged the film world. Spike Lee said bluntly, Denzel was robbed. Everyone in the world knows who deserved that award. As for Spike himself, despite directing one of the most acclaimed films of 1992, he wasn't nominated for Best Director or Best Picture. Once again, the Academy turned its back. Not everyone stayed silent. Critics, scholars, and film magazines erupted. Time magazine wrote, if the Academy forgot, do the right thing. In 1989, they're repeating the same mistake in 1992. Newsweek called it the clearest proof yet of Hollywood's conservatism toward black artistry. Still, Spike Lee didn't crumble. In a later interview, he said, I didn't make Malcolm X to win awards. I made it so black kids could see themselves on screen and feel proud. The film transcended cinema to become a cultural monument. Spike Lee's Malcolm X was named one of Empire magazine's 100 most influential films of the century, and was preserved by the U.S. National Film Registry as a cultural and historical treasure. But for Spike, behind the glory was a sadness that words can't capture. He had poured his heart, career, and reputation into this film only to realize that Hollywood, the system he sought to change, remained as cold as ever. "Malcolm X taught me that freedom is never free," he said. "Not even in cinema." After Malcolm X, Spike Lee became a symbol of endurance, but also a man who knew better than anyone the price of truth. And when the dust of glory settled, he faced years of struggle with his reputation, his finances, and his own faith, all tested by fire. Because in Hollywood, making films about Black lives is hard, but being recognized for doing the right thing is even harder. When the fire of defiance began to fade, after Malcolm X, Spike Lee was hailed as the irreplaceable voice of Black cinema. But then came the 2000s, and that fire began to flicker. The new decade opened not with triumph, but with a series of falls. Bamboozled, 2000 House, his biting satire of American television, was a bomb in every sense. Spike told the story of an exhausted Black screenwriter who, fed up with systemic injustice, creates a grotesque TV show in which Black actors perform in blackface, mimicking minstrel shows of the past. The film was sharp, allegorical, and deeply unsettling, but too extreme for mainstream audiences. People didn't know whether to laugh or to recoil. Critics were divided, box office returns dismal, and Hollywood turned its back. The following years were filled with experiments that failed to land. She Hate Me, 2004, about a disgraced businessman who becomes a sperm donor to survive, was derided as both preachy and incoherent. Miracle at St. Anna, 2008, a heartfelt World War II drama about 4 Black soldiers, became a financial disaster, a $45 million budget, less than $9 million in revenue. The Guardian bluntly called it the worst film of Spike Lee's career. For a director who once shook the world, it was a devastating blow. At the same time, Spike Lee's footing in the studio system began to crumble. Producers who once eagerly wrote him checks now hesitated. Inside Man, 2006, a slick heist thriller starring Denzel Washington, became Spike's highest-grossing film, earning $186 million worldwide. Yet ironically, it was also his least Spike Lee movie. No racial satire, no political commentary, just pure entertainment. "I know what audiences want," he said, "but that's not me." Then came Oldboy 2013, his remake of the Korean classic, which turned into a catastrophe. The studio interfered heavily in post-production cutting. 35 minutes Spike considered essential. Furious, he stripped the traditional A. Spike Lee joint label from the credits and replaced it with the colder A. Spike Lee film. It was his way of saying, "This isn't mine anymore." Career setbacks were soon followed by personal battles. Spike's temper and uncompromising ego led to clashes with major figures. When Clint Eastwood released his twin W2 dramas, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006, Spike publicly criticized him. Not one Black soldier in either film, even though history shows they were there. Eastwood snapped back, "Shut your mouth, kid." The media dubbed it the War of Legends. They reconciled years later, but the scars remained. Spike also feuded bitterly with Quentin Tarantino, accusing him of treating racial slurs as jokes. Tarantino fired back, "I don't need Spike Lee's permission to talk about Black people." From then on, the two directors became open rivals. Actor Samuel L. Jackson, a friend to both, was forced to defend Tarantino, further isolating Spike within the film community. As all this unfolded, Spike Lee's public image began to erode. No longer just the rebel artist, he was now branded Hollywood's grumpy old man. The media magnified every misstep as evidence of decline. And Spike, once the cinematic voice of justice, found himself judged by the same public he once spoke for. In March 2012, amid outrage over the Trayvon Martin case, the shooting of a Black teenager that shook America, Spike Lee tweeted what he believed was the shooter's home address. He was wrong. It belonged to an elderly couple with no connection to the crime. They were harassed and threatened for days. Spike quickly apologized and paid compensation, but the damage was done. The couple sued him for inciting violence, though the case was later dismissed. "I learned an expensive lesson," he admitted. "One tweet can destroy your career. Beyond social media, Spike faced mounting criticism from feminists and scholars. Writer and activist Bell Hooks, a towering voice in black feminism, declared Spike Lee condemns white racism, yet objectifies black women the same way they do. The comment hit hard. It accused him of betraying the very values he fought for. Actress Rosie Perez, who had filmed a nude scene in Do the Right Thing, later admitted she'd felt deeply uncomfortable, though Spike later called to apologize. These cracks revealed that he was no flawless icon, but a man who sometimes let passion eclipse empathy. During this period, Spike Lee was caught between indifference from Hollywood and doubt from the public. Studios labeled him difficult to work with. Independent investors were scarce. In the press, critics began using the word relic to describe him. One reviewer wrote Spike Lee was once the voice of a generation, now he's just an echo. Yet what hurt Spike the most wasn't financial failure or professional isolation. It was the feeling of being forgotten. In the 1980s and 1990s, he embodied black pride. By the early 2010s, as a new wave of filmmakers like Ava DuVernay, Selma Barry Jenkins Moonlight, and Ryan Coogler, Black Panther rose to prominence, Spike Lee became the silent figure watching from the sidelines. Still, he refused to stop working. "I can't sit still," he said. "As long as I breathe, I'll tell stories." But this era, marked by conflicts, misfires, and personal missteps, became the darkest chapter of Spike Lee's career. The story of a man who once dared to do the right thing, yet paid dearly for his uncompromising honesty. The loneliness of old age. 30 years after, Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee still stands there between the glitter of Hollywood and the chaos of America. But this time, the spotlight no longer shines on him as it once did. In 2015, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences awarded Spike Lee an honorary Oscar for Lifetime Achievement at age 58, making him the youngest recipient ever. The audience gave him a standing ovation as if Hollywood was finally trying to atone for its past. Spike wore a bright purple suit, the color of his beloved New York Knicks, and smiled, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "They're giving me this because I'm old now, not dangerous anymore," he said, half joking, half bitter. The remark was both self-deprecating and cutting a reminder of how Hollywood treats those who once dared to challenge it. 3 years later, Spike roared back with BlacKkKlansman 2018, the true story of a black police officer who infiltrates the Ku Klux Klan. The film stunned critics, earning 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Director, the first of Spike's career, and winning Best Adapted Screenplay. When he stepped on stage to accept his long-overdue Oscar, he wept. After more than 3 decades of struggle, Spike Lee finally held a golden statue of his own. But the joy was short-lived. Moments later, Green Book, a feel-good story about friendship across racial lines directed by Peter Farrelly, a white filmmaker, won Best Picture. Critics called it a déjà vu of Driving Miss Daisy. History was mocking him 30 years earlier. Driving Miss Daisy had triumphed over Do the Right Thing. Now Green Book had beaten BlacKkKlansman. When reporters asked for comment, Spike simply said, "It's not my cup of tea." Everyone knew what he meant. Once again, the truth had lost to Hollywood's favorite kind of moral comfort. By his 60s, Spike Lee seemed to have learned the art of silence. But life kept testing him. In 2023, his father, jazz musician Bill Lee, passed away at 94. Bill had composed the music for many of Spike's early films, especially Mo Better Blues and She's Gotta Have It. Yet their relationship had been strained. In the 1990s, they stopped speaking, after Bill's struggles with addiction and his marriage to a much younger woman. "I was angry at him," Spike later admitted to the Los Angeles Times. "But everything I know about rhythm, about the soul of black people, came from him." When his father died, Spike wrote only one line on social media, "Rest in power, Pops." A decade earlier, in 2013, his younger brother Christopher Lee had died of a heart attack at 55. The two had often clashed. Chris even publicly criticized Spike in interviews. Yet at the memorial, Spike's voice trembled as he delivered the eulogy. "We argued our whole lives, but I never stopped loving him." Those losses left him quieter than ever. Near 70, Spike Lee still refuses to stop working. He directed Da 5 Bloods 2020, about 4 black veterans returning to Vietnam in search of a fallen comrade's remains and a buried treasure. Critics praised it as an apocalypse now for the Black experience. But when Oscar season came, Spike Lee was once again overlooked. The old pain returned. What broke him more, though, was the death of Chadwick Boseman, star of Black Panther, and a key actor in Daw 5 Bloods. Boseman died of colon cancer at 43 just months before the film's release. "None of us knew he was dying," Spike said. "I thought he was just tired from the heat. Now when I rewatch the footage, I can see it. He gave everything just to finish that role. I owe him so much." When the world went into lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic, Spike turned once again to his oldest obsession, justice, and the way history repeats itself. In 2020, he made the short film Three Brothers, juxtaposing three scenes: the death of Radio Raheem in Do the Right Thing, 1989, the real-life killing of Eric Garner in 2014, and George Floyd's final moments under a police officer's knee. The closing line simply asked, will history stop repeating itself? 30 years on America still hadn't changed. The question wasn't just for the audience, it was a cry from the soul of a 64-year-old filmmaker who had spent his life demanding an answer. Even Spike's private life, once kept tightly guarded, began to show its cracks. He remained a die-hard fan of the New York Knicks, so much so that he was considered the team's living mascot. For nearly 3 decades, he sat courtside at Madison Square Garden shouting himself hoarse at every game. But in 2020, he was stopped by security at the employee entrance, the one he'd used for years. The guard told him new rules. Spike was furious, feeling publicly humiliated. On live TV, he declared, "I'm done with the Knicks." The Guardian called it a sad breakup between the team's most loyal fan and the love of his life. Though they later reconciled, Spike admitted, "That moment made me realize I'm really getting old." Outwardly, Spike Lee remains an icon, a film professor at NYU, an honorary member of the Academy, a director courted by Netflix and Apple TV. Yet behind that enduring image lies a deep solitude. No more flashing cameras, no more box office hits. Only the lingering question, have I really changed anything? Perhaps Spike already knows the answer. America still hasn't truly done the right thing. Now the man who once made Hollywood tremble speaks in a softer, deeper tone, holding on to the fragile belief that one day, the world will finally listen. And at nearly 70, as the lights of the studio fade, he still sits alone in the editing room, adjusting each frame with quiet devotion, as if cinema were the only thing keeping the loneliness away. Because for Spike Lee, filmmaking was never just a career. It was how he survived. And perhaps, it is also how he endures old age.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.